Another CEO Wisdom Pod today with Mark Frankel. He is CEO at Black Umbrellas. He is based in Cape Town, South Africa. We're going to talk about his agency, his company, Black Umbrella. He is, it's basically an incubator, and we're going to talk about that, which is quite interesting, and the development of South Africa and the growth of startups there. Mark, can you introduce yourself? Tell us a bit more about Black Umbrella.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Charles. Thanks very much. Afternoon. Black Umbrellas have been around since 2005. So we've been around for about 17 years now, 18 years. And we're a nonprofit organization, primarily focused on the development of Black-owned emerging businesses within South Africa. Primarily on Black-owned because the legacy of apartheid, I suppose, and the disconnected economy that we have within South Africa. So how do we, I suppose, enhance economic inclusion, get more diversity within the economy within South Africa? We're a country with very high levels of poverty, inequality and unemployment. So, the attempt to play a role, I suppose, in redressing the imbalances through small business and entrepreneurship.
I got a question with diversity. Is it right that the best and most capable / fittest entrepreneur, whatever his color, whatever his background, that person will always make it to the top? Is that a right way to think about it? Because in business, if we study billionaires, a good part of world's billionaires have been Jews, for example, and they've been persecuted for years and years, and still up to this day, right? You've heard lots of controversial character talk trash against Jews, like Kanye, not so long ago. So is it true that whatever adversity you face, as a person, whatever your background, you can make it to the top, and you will make it to the top if you're really fit?
Yeah, I think to a certain extent. I mean, definitely the people who have what it takes to be a great entrepreneur, provided with the appropriate opportunities, will certainly rise to the top. But, one needs to look at an even playing field in that regard, I suppose. So if you normally look at the situation, I think, most great companies are started by somebody who, invariably has some level of tertiary education. I'm not saying, that it's exclusive, obviously, but I think if you look at, a reasonable cross-section, and some work experience to a certain extent. And a big thing is also networks, obviously. So if you look at the education side, if you look at the access to networks, and there's also the access to markets, obviously, which is key, and the access to funding. So if you look at South Africa as a country, firstly, as the landscape within which to participate as an entrepreneur. So we have we have a challenging economic environment at the moment. I mean, it's a global situation, obviously, but we've had, low levels of growth in South Africa pre-COVID, and it's been, impacted further by COVID. And if you also look at South Africa as a country from an entrepreneurial perspective, so what's the ease, I suppose, of being an entrepreneur, starting a business, growing a business within South Africa? So we're pretty far down the ranks in that regard. So you've got a challenging environment where there's not much, or there's not the level of economic activity one would like to see. You've got a very challenging entrepreneurial environment, and there they look at things like the level of access to funding, I suppose, protection rights around IP, etc., etc. And then you have an environment where your level of networks is probably not at the required level in order to grow your business. You have a level of education, because I mean, a lot of growth, I suppose, in terms of emerging businesses and entrepreneurship are largely around STEM, to a certain extent. So we have very poor performing levels of education within South Africa. It's about access to technology, to a certain extent as well. And that's also limited within South Africa. So it's not an enabling environment, both from a demographic point of view, I suppose, and a country situation within South Africa. So, we believe support is required to try and create an even playing field. And that does come through diversity within the economy and, a conscious and intentional attempt to enable that.
Right. In terms of what South Africa has in terms of strength as a country, what type of startups could you see thrive on an international level? Like, what are the resources? Is it the unique cultural background? Is it the problems that the country is facing, for example, the blackouts? Does that bring innovation? Is it the tourism? What are you seeing that could thrive on an international scale and level?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's not really the field that we play in. We're very much a development organization. So we're focusing on the lower levels of the economy, etc., but how people can use entrepreneurship to create a sustainable living for themselves and, ideally employ a few people and obviously benefit the community, their families, etc., etc. But to specifically answer your question, I mean, there are a lot of opportunities which are throughout Africa, to a certain extent. So you're looking at fintech, you're looking at edtech. So there, certainly opportunities in those regards. There's a company in the edtech space called Go1. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're a unicorn. It's a South African company, effectively within the edtech space. There's a lot of good fintech success stories as well around payment solutions, etc. So we have seen quite a few success stories in that area, and that is quite a strong focus when you look at your more sophisticated, more advanced companies. I suppose also in healthcare. There's also been some exciting developments in the healthcare arena. So yeah, so in a way, I suppose addressing the challenges within South Africa and broader Africa, but also have global applicability. Yeah.
Why the 100% failure rate in Black-owned business in Africa, in South Africa?
No, I don't think it's 100% failure rate. It is a very high failure rate. We support 100% Black-owned businesses, but the failure rate is high. So I suppose, typically, I mean, if you look at the market that we play in, to a certain extent, is that you have what they call necessity entrepreneurs and you have opportunity entrepreneurs. So those who are starting a business because they have no alternative. They don't have a job. They have no other source of income. So they try and start a business to be able to generate revenue. And then you have the opportunity entrepreneurs who see an opportunity in the market and then start a business, to try and take advantage of that opportunity. So we see a hell of a lot of necessity entrepreneurs within South Africa, starting the business through need. And there's no real validation around whether there is actually a market for that business. There's no strategy in terms of getting that business off the ground. So yeah, I mean, if you look at the stats within the country, and you benchmark that against other developing economies, etc., we're not too bad in terms of people starting businesses, but to get those businesses through the first 3.5 years to the established state, we see a high drop-off rate within that period, and I think it's largely because of those factors. So the work that we do as Black Umbrellas is we try and identify those people who have what it takes to be an entrepreneur. We help them, validate if the business is still at the ideation level. We help them validate that there is actually a market for their business. We help them put a business model canvas together, a startup plan, and then support them through that initial period of getting the business going.
And if it's very small businesses and new ones, what type of businesses are we seeing? Is it in the tourism sector? Is it agricultural, what type of businesses are quite trendy or could be more successful than others that you're seeing this year?
Yeah, so we sector agnostic as Black Umbrellas. So we focus on the skills to run a business well. So we see businesses across the spectrum, from agriculture to manufacturing, tourism, certainly services, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's not so much sector specific. It's more a case of the value proposition, that the business has for the market, and obviously being able to create the customer base. We see a lot of social entrepreneurship as well. With people addressing needs within their community, they see a gap. So some of the models within South Africa are built around what we call early childhood development, so kind of the preschool development phase, which is obviously lays a very strong foundation for the future years of education. So that's a strong focus within the country at the moment. Within healthcare as well, because our public health system is fairly overstretched. So there's a lot of work being done in terms of empowering nurses, etc., to start their own clinics, and those becoming businesses on their own. Yeah, so as Black Umbrellas, we support anybody from firm of accountants through to bakers. It just really depends on the person to a large extent, because that's key in driving the success of the business. The person having the right mindset, the right attitude, etc., to be an entrepreneur, and then obviously how they differentiate themselves in the market as to their product or service offering.
Yeah, I think that's important. It's just that me, for example, I have my product market fit lab, and I think it's extremely important to uncover niches that are hot right now and have a high growth capability over the next couple of years. Can make your life so much more easier. Just yesterday, I was reading my Twitter with a guy from France quitting the entrepreneurial game because he couldn't subside on a 60K euro salary with his wife yesterday with his logo creation business. And then I'm like, okay, but yeah, logo creation and AI can do that nowadays. There's tons of competition. So I believe it's quite important, the niche that you're in, and that you have some kind of laboratory like I do to constantly test where the market is. For example, I have this cold email machine that constantly tells me, okay, who's buying what and what's the potential growth rate of that niche. I also think that social startups are only for elite level, and this is somewhat contrarian / controversial. They're my favorite type of startups. Why? Because it's the heart and the brain, right? And you do good while making money. How does that get better, right? And hopefully something that you have a passion for. Just that these business are incredibly tight when it comes to margins. And I have the ultra libertarian philosophy that most of the time people should get very few help, and if they do, it should be by their own, not by governments and so forth. For example, I have my masterminds. I'm interviewing smart folks like you that I'm learning all the time. These are my own ventures. I'm independent, right? I don't need anyone's help externally from my own project. I'm extremely entrepreneurial, and I can survive in any scenarios, just like a cockroach, right? So these are weird philosophies. I do think that incubators like you do have value, but this landscape is so arid, it's so hard, it's such a jungle that only the finest of folks can kind of survive by nature. And I'm very much a proponent of tough love, and I'm pretty sure you also coach your founders to tell them that, look, this is not for the faint of heart. So let me ask you this first. What do you think about like these philosophies? Tell me your point of view about that.
Yeah, I think, look, I mean, they're valid, but I think
also come from a privileged background. Let's mention that, right? Like my parents were like a middle upper class, right? I grew up in Canada, so I had that support, quote unquote. So obviously, I'm very biased in these philosophies.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think, I mean, obviously what we try to do at Black Umbrellas is we try to do that within a nurturing environment. Because one of the big blockers as well in terms of people starting businesses. So if you look at the potential entrepreneurs who are actually going to start a business in the next 3 years, we we sit at about 20% of the population in South Africa versus 40% in the rest of Africa. So what we have to do is those who are thinking about it and have what it takes, we have to encourage them to take that leap and start. So, I mean, in terms of what you've described, it's like throw yourself into it and sink or swim to a certain extent. So we try to do that within a nurturing environment, because one of the big blockers is fear of failure. Okay, so look, I'd love to do this, but I'm too scared. And part of that fear is around the unknown. So how do we remove the unknown in terms of the work that we do as Black Umbrellas? And the unknown is really taking a person step by step. And I think it's pretty much what you've said as well. So we don't do the work for the entrepreneur. We provide them with tools and things to think about and apply that to their situation, and see what result they come out with. And it's it's a combination of learning master classes, coaching, and mentoring, and then saying it's okay to fail as well, because it's as long as you can learn from that process and fail forward, as they say. But to do that within a nurtured environment also helps. So rather do that as early as possible than to get too far down the line, and it becomes a lot more expensive, obviously. And then the last area that I wanted to mention is the sense of community as well. So I'm not on my own. That I'm part of an ecosystem, where other people are going through the same thing, and you can share that. And part of the work that we do is we also build the resilience and mindset of the entrepreneur as well, because we also have people coming from challenging circumstances and with the market that we play in. So how do you reinstill hope, and optimism and tenacity that it's worth holding on and clinging on to this idea that you have, but within a supported, nurturing environment. So we don't want to make you too soft, obviously, that you're not going to do what you need to do, but to try and cushion the blow a little bit when these things do happen.
I'm in favor of that. Like, because I'm trying to evaluate myself, because I'm always brash in my opinions, and I think that's why I have this podcast. It's to grow my brain. It's like, can I go like extreme left so that you can bring me back a bit more right? If I ask myself, do I have safety nets, right? Because what you are also is somewhat of a safety net. It's more than that. But what are my safety nets, right? I'll always have like a house and a bed, right? Like my wife's parents or my own parents, for example. If I really fall on my face, like and hit myself hard and injure myself, mentally speaking, then the probability of that happening are quite low, because I often push pain on myself. I invite pain, and I have a very good relationship with pain, which is somewhat rare in humans. I think to be a good entrepreneur, a sustainable one, you need to enjoy pain. The entrepreneur I was talking about yesterday, he was complaining about his health and all of that. And I really much believe in self-fulfilling prophecies, that like if you say that, oh, entrepreneurship is bringing these ills on me, and it's going to happen. Anything you think is real will happen in your life. You also need to run it in a sustainable way. So apart from mindset, there's various models in there, control your stress and so forth. But I have the safety net, and also even before these safety nets, my business ideas are becoming more and more ambitious, right? So if we start with the consulting / agency model, well, that's easy. You trade your time for money, right? So I think any human being on this planet should know that in the case that their ambitious startups fail, well, they can always trade their consulting times, right? And charge $150 an hour for whatever. For example, I have this DV license. DV is like the WordPress themes, you know, and I can build websites if I ever fail at everything, right, and sell the websites for 2 or 3K or 5K piece. If I really fall out flat on my face and hit myself financially, I can always recuperate for like a couple months and build websites or build Facebook ads like I did before. These are agency or consulting model, and I can trim my time. If I really fell out hard with like my SaaS models that are more complicated and so forth, I also think humans should know that and should always have this, oh, I'm good forever, right? As of now, although times are changing. Question I have for you, Mark, with with all of that being said, do you feel entrepreneurship is getting easier, or is it getting harder with the coming of AI and possibly AGI in the next 5 to 10 years? Do you feel this gives out like more opportunities for people? Do you think this AI will help them, or do you think it will make their lives harder if they don't use that technology?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think anybody truly understands the potential and consequences, I suppose, of AI. But at the moment, it is a tool, it is an enabler. So I do think there are definitely opportunities around it, because the way that we would like to use it, I suppose, is to free up the time that can be used more productively and more effectively. So yeah, to a certain extent, seeing how that can be incorporated and value can be added. And I suppose there's also the opportunities to see the gaps where, which can't be satisfied by things like AI, and enhance those. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question,
Yeah, kind
Charles,
of.
but
It's a complex one, you know, but I think it's like software is eating the world, and now AI is eating software, you know?
yeah.
So I do think it's going to make it harder for folks that do not adapt. And I do think it's going to make it easier for folks that do adapt, you know? The question is, where do self-reliance comes from? Is it like, oh, give me a small push and then I'll be good on my own? If I take my own case, my dad was an entrepreneur. Did he give me some push? Yes. Mostly his love and his support, right? Like just knowing that he would be there for me if I ever fell. But I've also always been this very brash, very pirate type of individual that like, okay, man, I'm good on my own. I'll be radically independent. And I think that's the main reason why I'm still alive. Now, is this genes? No, I think it's mostly my upbringing. Yes, the genes part is like me being ADHD and constantly having the system kind of reject me, right? Like when I was in primary school, I was always out of the class. Like the system didn't want me, you know, every year they threatened to fire me from the school. So, and I've been fired from childcare, imagine, you know, like they kicked me out. So I think like what that told my brain is that you're by your own, you know, you don't ever rely on someone, don't ever have an authority over you. And I think that's the real reason why I'm in entrepreneurship. I think in South Africa, people, like you said, they do it out of necessity. Sometimes the economy is quite bad. And I think if they've been slapped in the face many times and they've been rejected, they've been hoosted, I do think entrepreneurship becomes a lifestyle for them. And it's like, no going back. Now, can we make that economically sustainable for them and scalable? I do think so. If we teach them the skills, I'm a huge proponent in education. South Africa is also a beautiful country, culture-wise, has a lot for that plays. And what you're doing is very noble. It's like acting as their father, you know. It's like, yeah, son, daughter, you can move forward. I'll be behind you if you fall. And falling is normal, you know. Like I won't cry with you if you hurt your knee, you know. So just get up and try again. So, but yeah, we could further that discussion so much more. I feel we scratched the surface, and my brain's kind of, yeah, all over the place today. It wasn't the best interview, so sorry for that. But I do think you added tons of value there. So thank you for that, Mark. Where can people find out more about you and Black Umbrellas?
It's best to go to our website. So it's www.blackumbrellas.co.za, or they can just email me if anybody wishes to. It's Mark, MARKF, at blackumbrellas.org.